Welcome to Dream Stories by Dasha, your quiet place for sleep, comfort, and peaceful storytelling. Tonight, Alex will guide you through this story. So relax, breathe slowly, and leave the day behind. If you enjoy this channel, don't forget to subscribe and like this video. Now, close your eyes and drift into tonight's story. No one knew exactly how old the city was. The streets had changed over centuries. Buildings were rebuilt. Names disappeared. People came and went like passing seasons. But beneath the city, far below the noise of traffic and glowing apartment windows, there was another world that almost nobody knew existed. A hidden network of stone tunnels stretched underneath the oldest part of the city, cold, silent, forgotten. And somewhere deep within those tunnels, behind a narrow wooden door lit by a single golden lantern, lived an old clockmaker named Elias. Every night, long after the city had fallen asleep, Elias sat alone inside his workshop repairing clocks, not ordinary clocks. These clocks belonged to people. Thousands of them covered the walls from floor to ceiling. Large clocks, tiny pocket watches, elegant golden pendulums, delicate silver mechanisms that ticked softly in the darkness like distant heartbeats. Each one connected to a human life above the city. If a clock slowed, its owner began losing joy. If a mechanism cracked, sorrow entered their life. And if a clock ever stopped completely, Elias never allowed himself to think about that for too long. For decades, he had maintained the balance quietly and alone. Most people never noticed, which was exactly how it was supposed to be. That winter night, snow fell heavily above the city streets, while Elias carefully adjusted the tiny gears inside an old brass watch. His hands moved slowly, but precisely despite his age. The workshop smelled faintly of oil, dust, tea, and ancient paper. The only sounds were ticking clocks and the distant rumble of underground trains far beyond the tunnels. Then suddenly, one clock stopped. Elias froze immediately. Out of thousands of moving mechanisms surrounding him, silence from even one was impossible to ignore. Slowly, he stood from his chair. Somewhere near the back wall, hidden among hundreds of clocks, a small silver pocket watch had gone completely still. Elias approached carefully, and the moment he touched it, the lantern flames inside the workshop flickered. That had never happened before. The old clockmaker frowned deeply, because this was not an ordinary stopped clock. The mechanism itself looked untouched. No broken gears, no damaged springs, nothing wrong. And yet, it refused to move. Elias opened a large leather book resting on his work table and searched through pages filled with handwritten names and dates. Finally, he found the matching symbol. The watch belonged to a woman named Clara Vale, age 32, living somewhere above the city. Elias read the final note beside her name twice, then slowly whispered, "That's impossible, because according to the book, Clara's clock had stopped once already many years ago, and clocks were never supposed to stop twice. Outside, snow continued falling over the sleeping city while deep underground, surrounded by thousands of ticking lives. Elias stared at the silent silver watch and felt something he had not felt in many years: fear. Elias had not gone above the city in almost 11 years. There had simply been no reason to. His work existed below the streets, below the noise of ordinary life, hidden in the quiet machinery that kept thousands of unseen destinies moving forward. But that night, as snow buried the rooftops above him, he stood silently beside the old staircase leading toward the surface. In one hand, he carried Clara Vale's silver watch. In the other, a small lantern glowing with warm golden light. The tunnels around him felt colder than usual, almost watchful. Slowly, Elias climbed the stone stairs. Each step creaked softly beneath his boots. Dust drifted through the air. And with every step upward, the sounds of the city became clearer. Wind, distant traffic, the muffled laughter of strangers somewhere far away. By the time he reached the final door, snow was already blowing beneath the cracks in the wood. Elias pushed it open carefully. Cold winter air immediately surrounded him. For a moment, he simply stood there. The city looked different now, brighter, faster. Towering glass buildings rose above streets, filled with glowing signs and passing headlights. But beneath all the modern noise, Elias could still feel the same invisible rhythm of human lives moving around him. Thousands of clocks. Thousands of fragile stories. He pulled his coat tighter and stepped into the snow. Finding Clara should have been simple. Every clock carried traces of its owner. Usually, Elias only needed a few minutes to follow the faint connection between them. But Clara's watch felt strange, distant, almost faded, as though something about her life no longer moved correctly through time itself. The old clockmaker walked slowly through narrow streets, while snow drifted endlessly around him. People passed by without noticing him. A tired businessman speaking on the phone, a woman carrying flowers through the cold, two teenagers laughing beneath a shared umbrella. None of them realized an old man carrying a lantern was quietly listening to the invisible ticking of their lives. Eventually, the silver watch in Elias's hand began vibrating faintly. He stopped. Across the street stood a small bookstore cafe glowing warmly against the snowstorm. Its windows were fogged from the warmth inside. A wooden sign above the door read, "Moon and Pine Books." The watch grew warmer in his hand. Elias slowly entered. Soft music played quietly through the cafe. Only a few people sat scattered among shelves filled with old books and hanging golden lights. And near the back window, a woman sat alone with an untouched cup of tea beside her. Dark hair, gray sweater, tired eyes staring out at the snow. The moment Elias saw her, something inside him tightened. Because Clara Vale looked exactly like someone whose clock should have stopped long ago. Not physically. Her body was alive, breathing, moving. But the light people normally carried inside themselves, hers was fading, slowly disappearing. Clara turned slightly then, and for one brief second, her eyes met Elias's across the cafe. The old clockmaker felt the silver watch suddenly grow ice cold in his hand, because in that moment, the second hand moved backward, only once, but enough. Enough to make Elias understand something terrible. Time itself was beginning to break around her. Snow continued falling outside the cafe windows in slow, silent waves. Elias remained standing near the entrance for several moments, watching Clara carefully. The backward movement of the watch still echoed uneasily in his mind. In all his years maintaining the clocks beneath the city, he had never seen time behave that way. Not once. And yet now, the impossible had happened in front of him. Clara looked away from the window and lowered her eyes toward the untouched tea in front of her. She seemed exhausted, not physically alone, something deeper. The kind of exhaustion carried by people who have spent too long trying to survive quietly. Elias finally approached her table. "May I sit here?" he asked softly. Clara looked up, surprised. For a second, she studied him cautiously. An elderly man in an old dark coat holding a lantern in the middle of a snowstorm was not exactly ordinary, but something in his voice felt strangely calm. She nodded slowly. Elias sat across from her carefully. The cafe lights reflected warmly against the silver watch hidden inside his coat pocket. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Clara gave a faint, tired smile. "You look like someone from another century." Elias almost smiled at that. "In some ways," he replied quietly. "I suppose I am." That answer should have sounded strange, but somehow it didn't. Outside, cars moved slowly through the snowy streets, while soft piano music drifted quietly through the bookstore cafe. Finally, Elias asked, "Do you come here often?" "Every night lately," Clara admitted softly. She glanced back toward the window. "I can't really sleep anymore." The old clockmaker nodded slowly. He already suspected that. When clocks weaken, sleep is often the first thing people lose. Then come dreams, then hope. Then time itself begins slipping strangely around them. Elias folded his hands carefully. "Have you been dreaming?" he asked. The question made Clara immediately tense. She looked at him more carefully now. "How did you know that?" Elias remained calm. "What kind of dreams?" For several seconds, Clara said nothing, as though deciding whether this strange old man could somehow be trusted. Then finally she spoke quietly. "There's a room." The cafe suddenly felt quieter around them. A giant room underground filled with clocks, she continued softly. Thousands of them. Elias felt his heartbeat slow, and every night, one of them stops. Snow drifted softly past the windows behind her. Clara lowered her eyes. I hear it happen before I wake up. Tick, tick, silence. Her fingers tightened slightly around the warm teacup. And every time I wake up, she whispered, I feel like I'm running out of something. Elias stared at her silently, because she was describing his workshop perfectly. A place no ordinary person should ever see. The silver watch inside his coat suddenly vibrated again. Once, weakly. Clara looked up at him carefully. You know something, she said quietly. It wasn't a question. Elias hesitated. For the first time in many years, uncertainty entered his thoughts. The rules were clear. The people above the city were never supposed to know about the clocks, never supposed to see the machinery beneath their lives. But Clara's clock had already broken rules that should not be breakable. And deep inside, Elias feared something far worse than a single broken watch. He feared the entire system itself was beginning to fail. The cafe closed shortly after midnight. One by one, the lights above the bookshelves dimmed until only the warm lamps near the counter remained glowing softly against the snowy darkness outside. Clara pulled on her coat slowly, while Elias waited near the entrance, holding his lantern. You still haven't explained who you are, she said carefully. The old clockmaker looked toward the storm outside. No, he admitted quietly. I suppose I haven't. Clara studied him for a moment. Under ordinary circumstances, she would never follow a stranger into the night, especially not an old man speaking in riddles about dreams and time. But something deep inside her already knew this meeting was not accidental, and somehow, for the first time in months, she no longer felt completely lost. Snow swirled through the empty streets as they walked silently through the city together. Most shops were closed now, the roads nearly empty. Only glowing streetlights and distant traffic disturbed the silence of the winter night. Eventually, Elias stopped beside an old narrow alley hidden between two ancient stone buildings. At the far end stood a rusted iron gate half buried beneath ivy and snow. Clara frowned slightly. This place has been abandoned for years. Elias placed one hand against the gate. No, he said softly, only forgotten. The gate opened with a long metallic groan. Cold air drifted upward from the darkness beyond. Stone stairs disappeared deep underground. Clara hesitated. A strange uneasiness moved through her chest. Not fear exactly. More like standing at the edge of something impossible. Elias lifted the lantern slightly. You don't have to come, he told her gently. But Clara looked down into the tunnels again and realized something strange. Part of her already recognized them. As though she had walked those stairs many times before inside her dreams. Slowly, she stepped forward. The deeper they descended, the quieter the world above became. Soon the city itself disappeared entirely. Only the sound of distant dripping water and Elias's slow footsteps remained. The tunnels stretched endlessly beneath the streets. Ancient stone walls covered in age and dust. old pipes hummed softly overhead. And somewhere far ahead, Clara began hearing it. Ticking, at first faint, then growing louder. Hundreds, thousands, a constant sea of tiny moving seconds. Elias finally stopped before a large wooden door illuminated by warm golden light. For a moment, neither moved. Then the old clockmaker opened it slowly. Clara stepped inside and forgot how to breathe. The workshop stretched farther than seemed physically possible. Towering walls completely covered in clocks surrounded her in every direction. Large pendulums swung slowly through the dim light. Tiny silver watches ticked softly inside glass cabinets. Golden gears turned endlessly like pieces of some living machine. The entire room pulsed with time itself, and somehow, despite its beauty, the place also felt unbearably sad, because every ticking sound reminded her how fragile life truly was. Elias watched her quietly. Most people would have panicked, but Clara only stood there in stunned silence, as though some hidden part of her had always known this place existed. Finally, she whispered, "What is this?" The old clockmaker walked slowly toward the nearest wall of clocks. "These," he said softly, "are the lives of the city." Clara stared at him. Elias gently touched one small golden clock. "Every person above us has one." The mechanism ticked steadily beneath his fingertips. When a life changes, the clock changes. Clara's eyes moved slowly across the endless workshop. Thousands of lives, thousands of stories, all moving together beneath the sleeping city. Then Elias reached into his coat and removed the silver watch. The moment Clara saw it, her expression changed completely because she recognized it instantly, even though she had never seen it before. "That one," she whispered. Elias opened the watch carefully. The second hand trembled weakly inside, then stopped again. Silence. And throughout the workshop around them, several other clocks suddenly slowed. The moment the silver watch stopped again, the entire workshop seemed to react. A faint wave of imbalance passed through the walls of clocks. Some slowed, others skipped a beat. Elias immediately stepped forward and carefully steadied the watch in his hands, as if calming something alive. Clara watched in silence. Her breath had gone shallow. "What just happened?" she whispered. Elias did not answer immediately. Instead, he closed the watch and held it gently. "This should not be possible," he said quietly. His voice carried something heavier now, not confusion, but concern. Deep, practiced concern. Clara took a small step closer. "What do you mean?" Elias finally looked at her, and for the first time, there was no mystery in his expression, only truth. "Your clock is not only stopping," he said, "it is disconnecting." Clara frowned slightly. "Disconnecting from what?" Elias turned toward the vast wall of clocks. From here, the workshop looked endless, thousands of ticking lives. each one perfectly synchronized in a fragile balance. "From the system," he said. Silence followed. Clara shook her head slowly. "I don't understand." Elias walked to a large wooden table covered in old handwritten records. Carefully, he opened a thick book. Pages filled with names, symbols, and dates. He stopped at one entry. Clara Vale, her name. Clara stared at it. "I don't remember ever seeing that." "You wouldn't," Elias replied. "It was written before you were fully aware of it." Clara looked up sharply. "Before I was aware of it." Elias hesitated, then spoke more carefully. "Not all lives begin when people think they do." A cold silence filled the room. Clara felt something tighten inside her chest. "That's not possible," she said. But her voice lacked certainty. Elias turned the page slightly. "The first time your clock stopped, you were 16. Clara froze. The workshop around them suddenly felt too large, too quiet. "I nearly lost you then," Elias continued softly. "But something stabilized your time again." He paused. "And that should have been the end of it." Clara stared at him. Her mind struggled to hold on to reality. "I've lived a normal life," she said quietly. "I went to school. I worked. Her voice faltered. Elias did not interrupt. He simply watched her carefully, then said, "Yes, you did." A pause. "But fragments of your time were never fully stable." Clara stepped back slightly. "No," Elias lowered his voice. "Tell me about your dreams." The question hit her harder than anything else. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Clara swallowed. "The room full of clocks," she whispered. Elias nodded once. "That is not a dream." Clara looked at him sharply. "It feels real," she admitted. Elias's expression darkened slightly. "Because it is leaking into you." Silence fell again. Only the ticking of thousands of clocks filled the space. Clara felt her hands begin to tremble. "So what am I?" she asked quietly. Elias looked at her for a long moment, then answered with painful honesty. "You are someone whose time is no longer staying in one place." A heavy silence followed. Then he added, "And if we don't fix it, you will stop existing in the same way twice." Clara closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "How do we fix it?" Elias looked at the silver watch in his hands. For the first time, he did not answer immediately. Because the truth was something even he had never seen before. A clock that stopped twice did not mean a broken mechanism. It meant something was choosing to step outside time itself. And that was something even he did not fully understand yet. The silence in the workshop stretched longer than usual. Even the clocks seemed to slow, as if waiting for what would happen next. Elias placed the silver watch carefully on the wooden table in front of him. Clara stood opposite him, still trying to steady her breathing. "Tell me what to do," she said quietly. Elias studied her for a moment, then nodded once. "There is a restoration point," he said, "but it is not simple." He moved toward a section of the workshop Clara had not noticed before. A circular platform made of dark metal was built into the stone floor. Around it stood 4 tall clock pillars, each filled with rotating gears and glowing amber light. Clara followed him slowly. "What is that?" she asked. Elias did not look back. "The original calibration core," he said. "It stabilizes disrupted time threads." Clara frowned. "Time threads?" Elias finally turned to her. "Yes." He hesitated. "Every life is connected to the system through them." He gently placed the silver watch into the center of the platform. Immediately, the workshop reacted. Clocks around the room began ticking out of sync. Some sped up, some slowed. One distant clock even stopped for a single terrifying second. Clara stepped back instinctively. "What's happening?" Elias tightened his jaw. "The system is resisting." A low mechanical hum rose from beneath the floor. The metal platform began to glow faintly. Clara felt a strange pressure in her chest, as if something invisible was pulling her in different directions at once. Elias looked sharply at her. "Stay still," he said firmly, but Clara could feel it now. A pull, not physical, deeper. Like her existence was being gently stretched across moments she could not see. "I don't feel right," she whispered. Elias moved quickly. "Hold on," he said. He placed his hands over the control mechanism beside the platform. Old gears began to turn, slowly at first, then faster. The silver watch in the center trembled violently. Its glass cracked slightly. Clara gasped, and suddenly, everything stopped. Silence. The workshop froze completely. Even the ticking ceased. Clara blinked. The world felt suspended. Elias stared at the watch. "No," he whispered. The crack in the glass began to spread. Clara stepped forward instinctively. "Is it worse?" Elias did not answer. Instead, he looked at the surrounding clocks. All of them were frozen, completely still, for the first time in his life. There was no ticking in the workshop. Then, very slowly, one clock began to move again, not normally, backward. Elias's eyes widened. "That's impossible." Clara turned toward him. "What is?" But before he could answer, the silver watch in the center of the platform opened by itself, and inside, there was no mechanism anymore, only a small empty space. As if something had already left it, Clara stepped back. A cold realization spread through her chest. "If it's empty," she whispered, "then what am I?" Elias looked at her, his voice barely steady. "That is what we are trying to find out." And for the first time, he sounded uncertain. The moment the silver watch opened and revealed its emptiness, the workshop changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, but subtly, in a way that made reality feel slightly misaligned. Clara noticed it first. She looked down at her hands. For a brief second, They seemed less defined, like the edges of her fingers were losing focus. "Elias," she said quietly, but her voice sounded different even to herself, softer, farther away. Elias turned immediately and froze, because Clara was fading, not disappearing completely, but becoming unstable in space, as if the idea of her could no longer decide where to exist. "No," Elias whispered. He moved quickly toward the central platform, adjusting the calibration gears with urgency. The surrounding clocks reacted violently. Some sped up uncontrollably. Others froze mid-tick. The harmony of the system was breaking apart. Clara took a step back. Her body flickered for a fraction of a second. And for that same fraction, she was not fully there. "I can feel it," she said. Her voice shook. "I feel like I'm slipping." Elias tightened his hands on the mechanism. "You are not slipping," he said firmly. "You are unanchored." Clara looked at him. "What does that mean?" Elias hesitated, then answered honestly. "It means your time no longer has a fixed reference point." A deep mechanical hum rose through the floor. The entire workshop vibrated slightly. Some clocks began ticking backward again. Others sped up until their pendulums blurred. Elias stepped closer to Clara. "You need to focus," he said. "On what?" "Something real," he replied quickly. "Something that exists outside the system." Clara tried to breathe steadily, but each inhale felt slightly delayed, like air arriving a moment too late. "I don't understand what I'm becoming," she whispered. Elias looked at her with a rare intensity. "You are becoming a contradiction." A silence followed. Then he added more quietly, "And contradictions do not stay stable in time." Clara closed her eyes. For a moment, she tried to think of something grounding. A memory, a place, anything. But the strange thing was, her memories felt like they were not fully hers. Fragments drifting in and out like distant echoes. "I remember the dream," she said suddenly. Elias looked up sharply. "The room full of clocks," she continued. "It feels like it's getting closer." Elias's expression darkened. "That is not a dream anymore," he said. "It is the system trying to overwrite you." A cold silence filled the workshop. Then one of the clocks on the far wall shattered. Glass fell softly onto the stone floor. Clara flinched, and for a second, she vanished completely. Elias froze. "Clara!" No response. The workshop fell into absolute silence. Then, slowly, she reappeared, standing in the exact same place, but slightly out of sync, like reality had struggled to place her back correctly. Clara opened her eyes and whispered, "I think I'm being rewritten." Elias looked at the silver watch. The empty space inside it now pulsed faintly, as if something unseen was still trying to decide what Clara Vale was supposed to be. And for the first time in centuries, the Clockmaker understood something terrifying. This was not a broken life. This was a life that someone had tried to erase and failed to finish. The workshop was no longer stable. Clocks didn't simply tick anymore. They argued with each other in different rhythms, as if each one was trying to decide which version of time was real. Elias stood motionless for a moment, watching Clara carefully. She was still there, but not fully anchored, like a reflection on water disturbed by invisible ripples. "We need to stop the system from reacting," Elias said quietly. Clara looked at him. "Can it be stopped?" Elias didn't answer immediately. That silence was answer enough. Instead, he walked slowly toward the central calibration core again, studying the silver watch fragments in the empty shell. Then he spoke, more to himself than to her. "This isn't random." Clara stepped closer, though her movement felt slightly delayed. "What isn't?" Elias turned. "Your instability." He pointed toward the surrounding clocks. Something caused it. A low mechanical pulse echoed through the floor. Elias opened an old drawer beneath the control table and pulled out a second book, thicker, older. Its pages were darker, almost burned at the edges. Clara watched closely. "What is that?" Elias hesitated before answering. "The records of interference." He opened it carefully. Inside were entries that looked different from the others. Not names, not simple dates, but distortions, broken time patterns, events that were never supposed to exist. Elias traced a line with his finger. "There are only a few cases like yours." Clara felt cold. "How many?" Elias didn't look up. 3. Silence. Then he turned the page. "And all of them ended the same way." Clara swallowed. "How?" Elias finally met her eyes. They were erased. The word hit the room like a weight, not traumatic, just final. Clara took a step back instinctively. "I'm not erased," she said quickly. "I'm here." But even as she said it, her voice flickered slightly. Elias closed the book. "That's what makes this dangerous," he said quietly. "You are half recorded." A faint tremor moved through the workshop. One of the clocks behind them began ticking in irregular bursts. Elias turned sharply. "That shouldn't be happening." Clara looked around. "Why is this happening to me?" Elias walked toward her slowly. And for the first time, his voice softened. "Because something tried to remove you from the system completely." He paused. "And failed?" Clara stared at him. "Failed?" Elias nodded once, but it didn't disappear. He looked at the empty watch again. "It left a gap." Clara's breath caught. "And I filled it?" Elias shook his head slowly. "No." A pause. "Something else did." The workshop went silent again. Even the clocks seemed to hesitate. Clara whispered, "Then what am I?" Elias looked at her for a long moment and finally said, "A correction." A cold stillness filled the room. Then he added, "And corrections are not meant to exist for long." Clara's hands trembled. "So I'm just temporary?" Elias didn't deny it. Instead, he stepped closer to the central mechanism. "We can still stabilize you," he said, "but we have to find the original source of the interference." Clara looked at him. "And where is that?" Elias turned toward the deepest part of the workshop, a door she had not noticed before. Hidden behind layers of clocks, old, heavy, locked with mechanisms that looked older than the city itself. He spoke quietly. "Where time goes when it is removed." Clara stared at the door, and for the first time, she understood that her story was not about breaking. It was about something trying to decide whether she was allowed to exist at all. The hidden door had no handle, only a complex pattern of interlocking gears embedded into its surface, slowly turning in silence. Elias stood in front of it for a long time. Clara waited behind him, feeling weaker with every passing minute. Her presence still flickered, sometimes fully there, sometimes slightly delayed, like reality couldn't agree on her position anymore. "We don't have much time," Elias said quietly. Clara nodded. "I can feel that." Elias placed his hand on the door's mechanism. It responded immediately. A deep mechanical click echoed through the workshop. Then another, and another. The gears began to unlock one by one, as if the door itself was remembering how to open. Clara stepped closer. "What's behind it?" she asked. Elias hesitated, then answered. "The archive of removed time." The final mechanism released with a heavy sound. The door opened slowly inward. Cold air spilled out. Not ordinary cold, but a stillness that felt older than the city itself. Elias lifted his lantern. The light revealed a narrow corridor descending downward. Unlike the workshop above, there were no clocks here. Only smooth stone walls covered in faint glowing marks, like scars in reality. Clara stepped forward carefully. Every step felt slightly delayed, as if her body needed permission from time itself to continue moving. Elias followed close behind. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. Even Clara's thoughts felt slower. Finally, they reached a vast chamber, and both of them stopped. Inside the room were thousands of suspended fragments. Not objects, not memories, but moments. Frozen pieces of time floating in the air like broken glass. Some showed faint images, a child laughing, a train leaving a station, a woman standing in rain, waiting, a door closing forever. Clara stepped closer, mesmerized. "This is impossible," she whispered. Elias spoke softly behind her. "This is what the system removes when something doesn't fit." Clara looked at one fragment. Inside it, she saw a version of herself, standing in a room, normal, stable. But then the image flickered and disappeared. Clara stepped back quickly. "That was me," she said. Elias nodded. "One version of you." He looked around the chamber. "There were others before you." Clara turned sharply. "Others?" Elias's expression darkened. Yes. He walked slowly between the floating fragments. Every time the system encounters something it cannot stabilize, he paused. It tries to erase it. He stopped in front of a darker fragment. This one pulsed faintly, like it was still resisting. And sometimes, he added quietly, it doesn't succeed completely. Clara felt a chill move through her chest. So I'm not the first mistake, she said. Elias turned toward her. You are not a mistake. A pause. You are a surviving one. Silence filled the chamber. The floating fragments around them shifted slightly, as if reacting to her presence. Clara looked at them again, then asked softly, if others were erased, why am I still here? Elias stared at the darkest fragment for a long moment, then answered, because something interfered. He reached toward the fragment, and for the first time, it reacted. A pulse of light spread through the chamber. The floating moments trembled. Clara stepped back instinctively. Elias's voice became lower. And I think it is still watching you. The air in the chamber grew heavier, and somewhere inside the fragments of broken time, something began to move. The moment the fragments began to move, the chamber changed. Not physically, but in the way reality felt, as if the air itself had become uncertain. Clara stepped back instinctively, her balance slightly delayed, like her body wasn't fully agreeing with her movement. Elias lifted his lantern higher. The light trembled. Inside the floating fragments, shapes began to shift. The frozen moments were no longer passive memories. They were reacting, watching. Elias's voice lowered. Don't move too fast, he said quietly. Clara nodded, but even that motion came a fraction late. What is that? She whispered. Elias didn't answer immediately, because he could feel it too. Something in the chamber was no longer just storing removed time. It was aware. A deep pulse echoed through the floating fragments. Once, then again, like a heartbeat hidden inside the structure of reality. And then, one fragment darkened. Inside it, Clara saw herself again, but this version was different, standing still. Eyes open, not sleeping, not dreaming, just observing. Clara stepped closer without thinking. No, she whispered. That's not me. Elias grabbed her arm gently. Don't approach it. But it was too late. The fragment reacted. A sharp distortion rippled outward, and suddenly the air between them shifted. Clara gasped. For a brief moment, she was inside the fragment, standing in the same place. But the chamber around her looked wrong. Empty, silent, no Elias, no lantern, only floating darkness. Clara turned sharply. Elias! Her voice echoed strangely, delayed, like the chamber was repeating her words after a pause. Then she felt it, a presence, not behind her, not in front of her, but everywhere in the structure of the room itself. A voice emerged, not spoken, more like remembered. You were not meant to remain. Clara froze. The world around her flickered again, and she was suddenly back in the chamber, stumbling slightly as Elias caught her. "Clara," he said sharply, "what did you see?" Her breathing was unsteady. "I was somewhere else," she whispered. Elias looked at the fragment she had touched. It was now completely black, as if it had consumed light. His expression tightened. "It is aware of you now," he said. Clara swallowed. "Who is it?" Elias turned slowly toward the deepest part of the chamber. The floating fragments began to drift away from that direction, as if avoiding something unseen. He answered quietly, "The one who edits time." A heavy silence followed. Then Clara whispered, "So this isn't just broken time?" Elias shook his head. "No." He stepped forward. "This is controlled removal." The lantern flickered again, and far in the distance of the chamber, something moved between the fragments, not fully visible, but deciding where Clara should belong, or whether she should belong at all. The chamber fell into an unnatural stillness. Even the floating fragments of removed time stopped drifting, as if something had pressed pause on reality itself. Clara stood close to Elias, barely breathing. She could still feel it, that presence. Not in front of them, not behind them, but threaded through everything, like an invisible hand resting on the structure of existence. Elias slowly lowered his lantern. "This is where it ends," he said quietly. Clara turned toward him. "What ends?" Elias hesitated, then answered, "Your instability, or you." A long silence followed. Then, from the center of the chamber, the darkness between fragments began to condense, not forming a shape at first, just narrowing, like something focusing its attention. Clara stepped back instinctively. "I don't understand what I did wrong," she whispered. Elias looked at her. "You didn't do anything wrong." A pause. "That's the problem." The air shifted again, and then the fragments around them began aligning, not randomly, but deliberately, forming a structure, a pattern, a shape that had no physical body, yet still existed through the arrangement of deleted moments. Clara's breath caught because she realized what she was seeing. It wasn't a monster dot. It wasn't a person. It was a system made visible. A force that existed only to correct what reality could not allow. A calm, silent intelligence built from removed time itself. Elias spoke softly, the editor. The word echoed through the chamber. Clara felt it immediately, a pressure in her chest, like something had acknowledged her existence directly. A voice emerged, not loud, not emotional, just absolute. Clara Vale is an unresolved correction. The fragments around them trembled. Elias stepped forward slightly. "She is stabilized," he said firmly. "She is no longer a violation." The presence paused, then responded. "Stability is temporary. Clara felt her legs weaken. "I don't want to disappear," she said quietly. Her voice did not echo. The chamber itself seemed to listen. A long silence followed. Then, for the first time, the editor addressed her directly. "You were created in contradiction." Clara froze. Elias turned sharply. "That is not true," he said. But the presence continued. A life removed, a gap left behind, a correction formed to prevent collapse. Clara's hands trembled. "So I'm not real?" she whispered. The chamber darkened slightly. Elias shook his head firmly. "No," he said, "you are real." He stepped closer to her. "Because you are here." The lantern light flickered. The editor responded, "Reality is not defined by presence. It is defined by permission." Silence. Then, the floating fragments began to collapse inward. Clara felt herself slipping again. Her body flickered. Her voice fractured slightly. "I can't hold on," she whispered. Elias grabbed her hand tightly. "Listen to me," he said urgently. "You are not a correction anymore." Clara looked at him, and for the first time, there was fear in his eyes. Not of the system, but of losing her. Elias turned toward the chamber core. "The only way to stabilize you permanently," he said, "is to rewrite your anchor point." Clara shook her head. "That sounds like disappearing." Elias hesitated. "Yes," he admitted. A pause. "But into a single, stable version of you?" The chamber trembled. The editor remained silent now, observing, waiting. Clara looked at Elias. "If I choose this," she whispered, "will I still remember?" Elias's voice softened. "No." A long silence. Then Clara nodded slowly. "Then I don't want to be stable," she said quietly. Elias froze. She continued, "I want to be me. Even if it's not perfect." The chamber went still. The editor responded one last time. "Then you accept eventual dissolution." Clara closed her eyes and whispered, "Yes." A long pause followed. Then the pressure lifted. Slowly, the fragments stopped collapsing. The chamber stabilized. Elias felt it immediately. Clara was still there, fully, not erased, not rewritten, just existing. The editor's presence faded into the structure of the chamber. Not gone. Just no longer intervening. Elias exhaled slowly. "You chose uncertainty," he said quietly. Clara gave a faint, tired smile. "I chose myself." The lantern light steadied. For the first time since this began, the clocks above the city felt normal again. Back in the workshop, thousands of clocks resumed their quiet, steady ticking, balanced, alive. Elias and Clara stood together in the chamber of lost time, surrounded by fragments that no longer needed to decide her fate, only to remember that she had already made that choice herself. This story began with a broken point in time. Clara was never meant to exist in two versions of reality at once. And slowly, her life began to fade from a system that decides what is real and what must be erased. Deep beneath the city, Elias, the clockmaker of human lives, discovers an anomaly the system could not fully remove. But the truth is more complex than a simple error. Clara is not a mistake. She is the result of interference within the structure of time itself. And when she is given a choice, become stable and fixed, or remain herself, even at the cost of fading, she chooses to remain. Because sometimes it is not about being perfectly preserved within a system, but about simply being real. And in the end, time does not correct her dot, it learns to let her exist. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. And sometimes, the quietest stories stay with us the longest.